Hey everyone! For my philosophy paper, I researched the problem of free will and the different viewpoints one can take. This topic interested me when we were discussing it in class because of how diverse yet important it is in how we live and view life. Before I delved into the topic more, I needed to clarify what the problem of free will is. It consists of two parts: free will and determinism. Free will is the ability to determine our own actions, whereas determinism is the view that every event is caused by a previous event, including our own actions. Some events in the physical world we know to be determined, such as the sequence of the seasons. Free will and determinism appear to be contrasting ideas, so the challenge comes when we try to reconcile the two. Are we all similar to the man in the photo, controlled by a puppeteer? Or do we possess personal freedom? There are several viewpoints that can be taken on this problem, and after introducing what they are, I will spend the rest of the presentation discussing various philosophers' interpretations of them. First, as I mentioned before, the challenge of free will comes when we recognize the deterministic nature of the physical world. From that comes one doctrine an individual may take: determinism. The determinist or hard determinist rejects the concept that an individual can ever be free by accepting only that all events are caused by past events, such that nothing other than what does occur could occur. The viewpoint that is generally considered to be the opposite of determinism is libertarianism. Libertarianism concludes that some human actions are freely chosen because they are caused or controlled by the agent. In this view, determinism and free will are incompatible. Others may find compatibilism or self-determinism to be a more comfortable middle ground. Compatibilism claims that, although determinism is true, our actions can still be free because determinism and free will are not in conflict. For the sake of simplicity for this presentation, I will consider whether my decision to have pancakes for breakfast this morning was free or determined. 18th century French philosopher Baron d'Holbach is the first person I will be considering in the answer to this question. Being a hard determinist, he would have said no. My breakfast was determined by an unbroken chain of events. As I mentioned before, Baron d'Holbach was an 18th century French philosopher who happened to be a hard determinist. He would have said no, that my breakfast was determined by an unbroken chain of events. What I chose this morning was the inevitable result of what came before, perhaps a dream I had the previous night, or an ad on the television. This idea originates in part from a theory known as reductionism, which says all parts of our world and our own experience can be traced back to one singular thing or event. So while I might feel like I'm capable of making free decisions, my mental states produce physical states, and the physical world is deterministic. In D'Holbach's Of the System of Man's Free Agency, he clearly states his hard determinist position. Man's life is a line that nature commands him to describe upon the surface of the earth, without his ever being able to swerve from it, even for an instant. Nevertheless, in despite of the shackles by which he is bound, it is pretended he is a free agent, or that independent of the causes by which he is moved, he determines his own will and regulates his own condition. Now that I have covered Baron d'Holbach in the hard determinist answer to my question, I will be covering libertarianism and what a libertarian, Richard Taylor, would have to say about my question. A libertarian holds the belief that some actions are freely chosen because they are ultimately caused by the individual or agent. In answer to my question about breakfast, libertarians would respond that my decision was not necessarily caused by any event before it. Instead, it could be the result of non-physical events, such as my thoughts, that originated at that moment. I decided to eat pancakes because I decided to eat pancakes. However, this theory runs opposite to the way the physical world appears to work, in which one thing causes another. So the libertarian must reconcile this evidence with their theory by making a distinction in the types of causes. As I mentioned, the libertarian I will be discussing is Richard Taylor. He was an American philosopher and internationally known beekeeper, and he discusses agent causation as a solution to the libertarian conflict in his book Metaphysics. He distinguishes people as causes of their own behavior, saying, quote, "The only conception of action that accords with our data is one according to which people, and perhaps other things too, are sometimes, but of course not always, self-determining beings. That is, beings that are sometimes the causes of their own behavior. The individual is propelled by the mind to start a whole chain of causality that wasn't caused by anything else. For example, a person setting a baseball into motion by striking it with a bat likely just decided to do it. There was no prior cause. This idea contrasts from event causation, which holds that no physical event can occur without having been caused by a previous physical event. My example would still follow this definition of event causation, because the baseball was only flying through the air because it was hit by a bat, a physical event being caused by another physical event. So what would Taylor say about my breakfast inquiry? I was the cause of eating pancakes because I am a self-determining being. My choice of pancakes was my own. From these two definitions, agent causation and event causation, libertarians conclude that the physical world itself is deterministic, but a human has free will, or the ability to affect the causal chain of the universe. Being a bold statement, many philosophers think this idea is impossible. They wonder where would the free decisions that launch entirely new causal chains come from? Are they random? What would compel an agent to make one decision and not another? By answering these questions, you're just explaining what would cause an agent to act, and reinforcing the position that actions are caused rather than free. After these critiques, the best argument that remains for libertarianism seems to be that it just feels an awful lot like we are free, and we shouldn't discount our own personal, subjective experiences. If we feel we're free, libertarians feel we should seriously consider the possibility that we are. However, good philosophical judgment would recommend rejecting or withholding judgment from an argument until valid evidence can be gathered. The final viewpoint I will discuss regarding the problem of free will is compatibilism, also known as soft determinism. Compatibilism holds that free will and determinism are compatible, or that some of our actions can be free even if they are determined. A compatibilist acknowledges that there is a law-like order to which the universe operates, and that the past determines the future. But they also think there is something different about human actions. Some of them are free. They take this position by arguing the principle of alternate possibilities. The principle of alternate possibilities says that in order for an action to be free, an agent must have been able to do something other than what they have done. So not only must the action be caused by the individual's own choices or desires, they must not have been impeded or restrained by anything in following through with those choices or desires. According to the compatibilist, everything is still determined, but we can call an action free when the determinism comes from within ourselves. One way to better understand why this makes a difference is to consider being pushed off a diving board versus jumping off a diving board. In both cases, the end result is the same, or the action is determined. That is, it couldn't not happen, but only when the individual chooses to jump off the diving board should the action be considered free. This theory has the advantage of being able to assign moral responsibility for our actions, since the determinism for some of our acts can come from within ourselves. Harry Frankfurt, American contemporary philosopher, challenged the principle of alternate possibilities, which is one of the bases for compatibilism, in his essay Alternate Possibilities and Moral Responsibility, that was published in the 1969 Journal of Philosophy. He argued that an agent could, in some cases, be morally responsible for things he does, even when he couldn't have done otherwise. He referred to these situations as Frankfurt cases. One of these cases, however unlikely it is to happen, involves a Republican candidate implanting chips into people's brains that would only switch on if the individual were about to vote Democrat, and the chip would urge them to vote Republican. They decided to implant them in people of both parties to avoid blame if somebody were to find out. One unlucky recipient was a devoted Republican who went to vote Republican, then returned home without any second thoughts. The principle of alternate possibilities would hold that your decision to vote Republican was not free in this case because you couldn't have done otherwise. But Frankfurt challenges this conclusion by saying you were clearly still responsible for your vote because you did what you wanted to do, even though you had no other choice. I would apply this to my breakfast scenario by tweaking the scenario slightly so that I only desired pancakes but only had access to pancakes as well. Frankfurt would conclude that it was still my choice to eat pancakes for breakfast, while the compatibilist would reject this scenario and say that I did not have free will. In conclusion, there are many different viewpoints that have been formulated toward the problem of free will. I researched and then discussed hard determinism, libertarianism, and compatibilism, as well as influential philosophers that believe each of those theories. Then I applied those views to decide whether or not I chose what to eat for breakfast. Baron d'Holbach denied free will as a hard determinist, and I assumed that he would have denied that I exercised free will by choosing pancakes for breakfast. To d'Holbach, my decision was the result of a whole chain of previous choices and events. Richard Taylor, a libertarian, would have concluded that my decision to choose pancakes was my own because I am a self-determining agent. A compatibilist would say my choice of pancakes was free, as long as it was what I desired and I had the opportunity to choose otherwise. But Harry Frankfurt would say my choice of pancakes was free, even if I didn't have the opportunity to choose otherwise, simply because it was my desire. These are my sources that I used in this presentation. Thank you for watching. I apologize for the lateness and some technical difficulties figure out how to record my voice on a PowerPoint. Good luck on finals, and I hope everybody is staying happy and healthy.